I'm leaning over the little small cell wall, and I just looked at Linton and I said, you know what we should do in here? And she said, what? I said, we should do a rap song to the beat of the sound of the flip flops on the concrete floor and that industrial toilet flushing. So I was like, and we just started making up different lyrics about the the phone and the cost to collect calls, and I had her going. And at that moment, I began just laughing, so hard, and I really hadn't laughed in there, but maybe one time. And then Linton laughed. For days, she had been in there sleeping, crying and screaming, and it was great to see her laugh. And she said, Georgia, she said, you're a light in here. And she said, no one gets mad at you for staying on the phone. She said, no one can stay on as long as they want, and there not be an argument. And she said, and they don't care. I knew that I was just being a house for that light of Christ's Spirit. That's all it could be. And I was starting to feel rich in my soul again. All the times that I had been spiritually transformed, I was carrying little with me. My trip on the Camino Santiago after my grandfather died, I had a backpack with one change of clothes and a sleeping bag, and I was there in Spain for 3 weeks, just living out of a backpack. But I walked and I walked that trail with strangers and talking about while we were taking the pilgrimage. And while I was walking on the trail, I came across two women, and they were sitting out in front of a restaurant at a table, and one of them had her shoes off and her feet were covered in blisters. And I could just tell by her facial expression she was in excruciating pain. And I walked over and I looked down at her feet, and I couldn't walk one more step knowing that I had a gift of healing and a bottle of anointing oil in my pack. So we spoke different languages, but I was able to point to me, and then do my hands in like a prayer position, and then point at the oil in my pack and at her feet. And she nodded yes. And so I dipped my finger in the oil and I drew a cross over each foot. And then I said a prayer, for Jesus to heal her. And she cried and thanked me. And then her friend nodded for me to do the same for her feet. And a few days later, when I was at the airport in Santiago, I saw her and her friend, and they were walking just fine. They had finished that trail together. And these are just memories I'm having, that I'm revisiting in jail about my calling and my purpose on earth. And, I needed that Camino after my granddad passed away. And then I needed a different kind of Camino when my brother took his life. But after both losses, no matter how I tried to handle it, the grief hardened my heart and kept me separate from the love of Christ. And how many times had I myself been that lost sheep, and God sent somebody to rescue me. And so it goes back to comfort those in the same way you've been comforted. It was March 2nd, 2020, and so I had been locked up now for almost 2 weeks. And it wouldn't be long before that waiver that the judge signed 2 days after I had been booked that would expire. And so time was ticking, and I could be released and free to walk the streets of San Diego. I just wanted my freedom. And I was missing my son Jonathan so bad. And it was really hard to think about having a conversation with, my kid, son, while I was in jail. And so I I saw a woman that came in, and she sat down and at a table, and she was having her lunch, and she was crying. She was upset. She said her mom had come to do a visitation and had brought her daughter. And she said, I had to tell my mom, stop bringing her, because every time y'all come and visit and y'all leave, she screams and cries for me. She can't get to me behind that glass. And that just, oh my gosh, another, you know, heartache for somebody else in there. So, and then I just kept feeling like that was going to be the day that I was released. And I called my sister and asked if she'd been able to get in touch with my attorney. And she said, Britt, she said, I wasn't able to talk to him. She said, but I did have someone at the county jail tell me that you're going to be picked up on the 6th. She said, so it's not too much longer and you'll be home with us. And so I told her, I said, thank you for making all these phone calls, and I appreciate it so much. So I had when I ordered my commissary, I bought a $5 phone card so I can call Jonathan without call and collect. And I hadn't talked to him yet, and I'd been in there for 2 weeks. And so I called him, and he said, Mom, he said, how is it in there? He said, you know when you're going to be getting out? And I said, I'm okay right now, buddy. And I said, I do have something funny to tell you. And I said, the other night, I was about to go to sleep, and I said, there was a woman in there. She opened up her bag of Cheetos, and I said, she took one out at a time, just crunching them slowly. And I said, the sound just echoed through this whole building. And I laughed, and he laughed. And I did not want our few minutes on the phone to be stressful for him. And so that was one of the hardest things about being in there. And so I wrote a journal entry, one of the things that I had done in there about jail starting to remind me of a controlling relationship. And I wrote, jail reminds me of being in a controlling relationship. I said, you're told when you can eat. I said, you're told what you can wear, when you can talk on the phone. And if you have been on the phone too long, the other person gets agitated. I said, there's manipulation where you're treated nice in order to give up the things to another person who needs it. I said, there's a feeling of isolation from the ones that you love, and having the freedom to go and do whatever you please. I said, all these things create a great deal of depression, anxiety, loss of hope. I said, it's really hard to feel purposeful when everything is being controlled. You never know if you're going to be dealing with a good mood or a bad mood. The whole place starts messing with your head. So, chow time. We lined up at the door, again, taking turns yelling our number. And the woman behind me started talking to me. And it was the woman that had shaved her head, and we had a little bit of conversation in the day room. And then also she was the one who had jumped in that bed with me. And it scared me, because I knew if I got caught with her jumping in the bed with me, I would have been, thrown back into a holding cell. But she whispered that she was going to try and do something, like sneak and do something wrong. And I said, listen, I'm just trying to do the right thing and get out of here and go home. And she said, well, that's because you're Mary Magna Brittany. And I wondered if she knew much about Mary Magdalene. By the time we had finished a few short sentences, we were at the chow hall, and she scooted around me and said, she kind of whispered, watch this. And so there was a special area on the counter where trustees would prepare food and put in a paper sack, and they were the meals for the pregnant women. And so she was inching up as close as she could to that area, and then she slipped one of those sacks in the waistband and walked over, get her regular food, and sit down and ate. And we were motioned to sit at the table by the door, and she whispered, "I totally got away with this." And I just couldn't understand, like, what made her want to go do something in order to try to get away with it. But she did. So we ate our food and we had it over the trash area, started throwing our things away, and I was so tired. I had no energy to do anything other than eat, take naps, read my Bible, read books, and journal. We walked back down the dorm as usual, and this time I had thoughts of that woman getting caught on camera for stealing, because you were on camera everywhere you were, except for the showers or the bathroom. And so after we were sent back to our cubbies, she was approached by the deputy. I mean, it didn't take long. She said, "Get your things and get out of here." I knew that she had given me positive scriptures, but I also knew she was reckless. And I did not want her to come crawl back in bed with me again and me catch another charge. And I just felt like God was protecting me, because she was having other women in there take showers next to her so she could look in on them. And it's just kind of some, weird sexual stuff without being touchy in the showers a lot of times. Anyway, I thought about, when I laid down, about some more emails that I was hoping I would be getting, and the deputy came through and handed me one, and it was from my sister. Only it wasn't from my sister, it was from my 8-year-old nephew. And he just said, "Hey Britt, this is Hugh, I love you." And I just allowed that 8-year-old's little words to soothe my heart until I fell asleep.